Hey, legalizers, welcome back to the channel. I'm your resident weed nerd, a cannabis industry lawyer and dispensary owner who's been fighting the good fight for legalization and not loopholes. Today, we pick up where we left off from my last gripe. Congress now has some good bills in it for 2025. Two fresh off the press bills dropped in Congress on April 17th, 2025, the States 2.0 Act and the Prepare Act. These could be keys to unlocking federal cannabis reform impacting our dispensary, your stash, and the 24 states where recreational weed is legal, plus 38 with medical programs. Are these bills real or just another DC pipe dream? Well, after reviewing the language in the bills, I'm here to break them down about what's in them, what they're trying to do, and whether they have a snowball's chance in hell of becoming law. Spoiler, I'm skeptical, but there's a tiny spark of hope. So grab a joint legally, we hope, and let's get rolling. But if you're new here, subscribe to watch the laws change and like the videos to help spread them around. First up, the state's 2.0 Act, introduced by Reps David Joyce, Max Miller, and Dinah Titus. Its full name follows the standard naming convention for legalization bills, being an acronym. So here's the full version: strengthening the 10th Amendment through entrusting states act. And you can see States Act. It basically says, hey, feds, let the states do their weed thing. The bill tweaks and amends the Controlled Substances Act somewhat like the Farm Bill did for hemp, taking it out of the schedules, but only if it is legally grown on a license in a particular state. So, what's the big idea? If marijuana follows state or tribal laws, most federal rules don't apply. That's a real game changer for the 24 states with recreational cannabis and the 38 with medical programs, plus the tribes that are getting in on the action. Anyway, what's in the bill? This bill amends the Controlled Substances Act by adding new language saying state compliant marijuana is exempt from the federal ban. It's a little interesting that the federal law of the land would depend on what state you are in. Being a Schedule One substance in, for example, Indiana, but then across the border in Illinois, being an unscheduled substance. Uh, The States Act 2.0 effectively says, chill, focus on something else, which always works when you tell someone to do that. The Attorney General would then have 180 days to make this official, descheduling compliant weed so it's not a controlled substance. But there are guardrails: no selling to anyone under 21, no hiring kids under 18 for cannabis jobs, and you better follow the state rules or you're back in trouble. It also protects tribes, letting them regulate marijuana on their lands if they're in a legal state, which is a nod to their sovereignty. And next, it tackles interstate commerce. Right now, cannabis can't cross state lines legally, can't even exist legally, at least federally, which is a headache for businesses like mine. The bill says that no state or tribe can block weed shipments if both the starting and the ending states are legal, just like the hemp laws. However, states can still set time, place, and manner rules, like keeping dispensaries away from schools, but they can't play border patrol. This could open up a national market, making legal weed cheaper and cutting into the illicit market, which, fun fact, is still 75% of marijuana sales, at least according to what the States Act founding facts say at the beginning of it. So, shady dealers, your days may be numbered. Yeah, because you always cared what the law said before. You totally followed it. Anyway, then there's the regulation. The bill hands marijuana products, thinks edibles, vapes, or tinctures, to the FDA and the Alcohol, Tobacco, Tax, and Trade Bureau. If it's a drug, it's treated like one. If it's a food or supplement, it's regulated like boozy snacks. Other products would get new rules within 180 days, covering testing for contaminants, manufacturing standards, and marketing to keep it away from kids. No pre market approval is needed, which is a relief for many small businesses. But if you want to mix weed with tobacco or alcohol, that is expressly a no go according to the terms of the States Act 2.0. And that would make it considered adulterated. But the FDA considers that THC seltzer in your fridge adulterated as well. At least right now it does, until there are new laws passed to grant the FDA the right to regulate cannabinoids found in hemp beverages. Financially, the States Act 2.0 is a lifesaver. It says compliant cannabis transactions aren't trafficking, so no property seizures or money laundering charges. Even better, it scraps IRC, that's the Internal Revenue Code, Section 280E, the nightmare rule blocking cannabis businesses from deducting normal expenses. Right now, We're taxed at rates up to 70% because it's on gross profits instead of net revenue. This fix could save dispensaries big time, letting companies invest in better products, like actual profits. Safety wise, it keeps penalties for selling to minors, except for medical marijuana prescribed to those under 21. Plus, it orders a study on how legalization affects traffic safety crashes, DUIs, you name it, to make sure that we're not turning our roads into hotbox highways. All in all, the States Act 2.0 is a pretty practical plan that lets states lead while keeping things safe and sane. But here's a $1 million question. Will it pass? Honestly, it's a tough road ahead. The bill has bipartisan support, and the public support for legalization is sky high. About two-thirds of Americans are on board. The push to reschedule cannabis to Schedule 3 helps making banks and feds less twitchy about lending or offering services to licensed cannabis businesses. But Congress, much like many American families, is a dysfunctional mess. Similar bills, like the Safe Banking Act, passed the House many times, but kept hitting a Senate wall. With senators backing a version of this before, it's not impossible, but we'll need some real Republican heavyweights to push it. Maybe by tacking it onto a must pass bill like defense spending or tax cuts. Still, no votes about this may come to the Senate floor under its current leadership. My gut, which is what I listen to on these things, say that it has maybe a 10 to 20% chance. Better than a snowball's chance in hell, but nothing you want to hold your breath on or bet on the outcome of it actually passing. Switching gears, let's talk about the Prepare Act, also introduced by David Joyce and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Its full name, Preparing Regulators Effectively for Post-Prohibition Adult Use Regulated Environment Act. Ah, bleh. But that does spell prepare. You see, you take a big honking name and you make it into a word. Anyway, the Prepare Act is all about getting the world ready for when federal prohibition ends. This bill does not legalize cannabis outright. Instead, it sets up a commission to figure out how to regulate it, like we do with alcohol. Think of it as the government is saying, this legalization is going to happen, so let's not screw this up. After reviewing the law, it really kind of seems to me like what was Part F of the Controlled Substances Act. That was from the 1970s with the Schaefer Commission that they published after they did all these studies and said that it shouldn't have been a Schedule 1 thing anyway. And then Nixon threw that in the trash. Let's dig into it. After a break from KindPen, you can get a great vaporizer for herbs or concentrate of your choice over at thekindpen.com. Look into them and use the coupon code in our newsletter that subscribers get. You can subscribe to our newsletter in the pinned comment. Now, back to it. The Prepare Act creates a 29-member commission on the federal regulation of cannabis, led by the Attorney General within 30 days of passing. This crew is a who's who of experts: DOJ folks, FDA and ATF heads, a hemp farmer for some reason, a doctor researching medical weed if they can get funding to do so, even someone who did time for a non-violent cannabis offense. They've got 1 year to propose a regulatory framework, hopefully by April of 2026, if it passes soon. They'll look at everything: productions, sales, taxes, trade, while keeping it adult use only, except for prescribed medical use for those under 21. The commission's to-do list is pretty long. They'll tackle the damage from criminalization, especially for minority and low-income and veteran communities hit hard by the war on drugs. They'll figure out how to get banks to work with cannabis businesses. Make it legal. That's one way. Because right now, we're taking the cash we earn to fund build-outs on a building we own free and clear because we paid for it in cash. It's nuts and really difficult. Research, also a huge barrier because it's Schedule 1, but that would be one of the commission's focus, plus training doctors at public medical schools. So they'll also set rules for product safety, like labeling, to keep kids safe, and sort out how hemp can coexist with cannabis crops and not cross-pollinate one another and mess up THC levels. Maybe they'll even fix how they test THC levels. Here's how it's supposed to work. 60 days after starting, they'll ask for public comments from industry folks, justice advocates, and regular people like you. Within 120 days, they'll drop initial findings online, and then they'll have a public hearing by late October of this year if it magically passes, featuring state licensed operators and people who've been locked up for weed. After more feedback, they'll publish final recommendations on the DOJ's website, outlining a federal system modeled on alcohol regulation. Think producers, distributors, retailers. Those are the three alcohol licenses. You can make the beer, you can transport the beer, or you can serve the beer. With taxes and age limits, the bill's findings are a history lesson. Cannabis was legal until 1937, then banned partly to target minorities, despite the American Medical Association saying we have no evidence of anything of what you're talking about. See Dr. Woodward for more on that. I think we did a video about it like 3 years ago. Now, 38 states and DC have medical cannabis, 24 have adult use, and the US even held a patent on medical cannabis since 2001. But Schedule 1 status blocks research, and people are still getting arrested while the feds cash in on the IRC 280E taxes. The fact finding from the bill is a mess, but the Prepare Act wants to clean it up. And what does it do? It's basically a blueprint for the future, or at least it's a planning commission for what the future's blueprint would be. If Congress follows the commission's plan, we could see a national cannabis market with consistent rules, social justice reforms like expungement, and more research for patients with pain, PTSD, or cancer. It's not about legalizing it tomorrow. It's about being ready when prohibition fails, which feels inevitable with the public support and states leading the charge. But what do you think? Will it pass? This one's trickier. This is way less controversial than the States Act 2.0 because there is no outright legalization. It's just a bill saying let's study it and not change any law. And so it's very low risk. It has bipartisan sponsors like Jeffries, and that kind of gives it street credit. The Democratic's leader is behind it. And it's cheaper than most reform bills because there's no big budget fights. You're not actually creating anything except for a commission. And Congress loves to kick the can down the road, also accomplishes that. And the Senate has stalled similar ideas with bigger fish to fry, like budgets and elections and taxes. But it's low stakes. And so maybe it has a decent shot compared to the States Act. Maybe like 30%. I still don't think it's that high. It's like betting on a sunny day in Seattle. Yeah, of course, it's totally possible, but don't pack the sunscreen just yet. And now let's get to the big picture. These bills show Congress finally waking up to cannabis reform. States 2.0 lets states and tribes run the show according to their rules. It cuts taxes and opens interstate trade, tackling today's problems. But it doesn't include any tax. It's only a 15-page bill. Maybe that'll come later. And the Prepare Act plans for tomorrow with steps shaping a fair, safe federal system. Together, they could definitely shrink the illicit market, especially the States Act, and help businesses like ours fix the damage from decades of bad policy. However, EC's track record on legalizing it is brutal to say the least. Good ideas die in the Senate or get lost in committee. The DOJ's Schedule 3 push and public pressure give this a little bit, but look how that's been derailed. And therefore, that's my take. States Act 2.0, practical, bold, tougher odds, prepares more of a wishy-washy, doesn't really do anything of a bill. So maybe it has more of a chance. If I had to bet, I'd say none of them are going to pass. Maybe prepare, but not both. It's like hoping our dispensary gets a federal tax break by Christmas. Like, I don't think it's going to be Schedule 3 by Christmas. Still, as a lawyer and a business owner, I am rooting for these bills. These bills could change lives from patients to entrepreneurs and communities hit by the drug war. All right, I want to hear from you. What do you think? Are these bills our ticket to freedom or just more Washington BS? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's keep pressure on Congress. If you want to track these bills, hit that like button, subscribe for more cannabis law breakdowns, and I'll catch you next time on Cannabis Legalization News Podcast most Sundays. Stay lit and keep working for what's right.